What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, February 28th, 2017, last day of the month. Tomorrow begins March. March is going to come in like a lion and go out like a lamb, we hope. And we have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Now, tonight, of course, President Trump is going to address a joint session of Congress to outline basically what his agenda is going to be for the coming months and coming years. And it's probably going to turn out to be a bit of a circus because the Democrats are bringing in all of these illegal immigrants and gays and everybody who are going to boo Donald Trump no matter what he says. And it really is a shameful display for Congress to behave like that, where we could see tonight's speech devolve into a session at Parliament. Now, over in Great Britain, when Parliament people are speaking, it's okay for them to cheer and boo and call names and all of that. But the American Congress has always prided itself on having a little bit more decorum. That may leave tonight here. And interestingly enough, there's a story out of newstarget.com on how Democrats are fast becoming America's largest hate group as they plan to troll President Trump's first address to Congress. They're loading up the audience with people who are going to boo him and everything. There's protests and demonstrations outside. And this basically supports what I was saying yesterday. The longer the Democrats go on behaving like this, the more they're discrediting themselves. They're damaging the brand. The Democrats are no longer being seen as the party of the people, but the party of the spoiled brat, the whiner, the crybaby. It's almost as if the election never happened. They're still campaigning. It's amazing. Now then, Donald Trump has been warning the corporate media to be more accurate in their reporting. Of course, we've been saying the same thing for 24 years over here. And apparently, the White House held a special press conference with Sean Spicer where most of the corporate media, the top ones, hang on a second, I got to fix something. Mike in the control room is saying my BAM user feed isn't working, but it's going out from here, but it may be under hack attack the same as the server has been by those aforementioned crybabies. Anyway, they had a special press conference with Sean Spicer where they basically banned CNN, New York Times, LA Times, BuzzFeed, Politico, also the Daily Mail, the BBC, and the New York Daily News. Now, Fox, CBS, NBC, and ABC were allowed in. So it isn't just a sweep of all liberal outlets. They're basically saying those media outlets that have a past history of distorting what Donald Trump says are simply not going to be allowed in. And the crybabies at the networks are going to be screaming about this. Now, I just got off the Richie Allen show, and we actually had a debate about this where Richie said that he is very shocked that any president would arbitrarily say that certain news media are not allowed into the press conferences. And I pointed out to him that presidents have always decided who gets in and does not get into the press room because it's a small press room. And the president and the spokesman have always pointed a finger to say who is and is not allowed to ask questions. It's a perk of the job. There has never been a time when they would simply open the doors and say, everybody connected with the media, just crowd on in. Or I certainly would have shown up one or two times myself. So let me see if okay. Well, apparently we're having a problem with BAM user. I'm transmitting from this end but apparently people are not getting it, and it's entirely possible my stream is being DOS'd. All right, now then. So we're basically back to this media war. And again, Richie Allen was saying, well, Trump's at war with the corporate media. No, the corporate media started this fight. They started it during the campaign. I'm sorry, I'm trying to deal with all this communication coming in from the control room, where apparently it's the link on my website that has stopped working properly. All right, you know something? I'm just going to wait until the next commercial break to deal with this, because that's not fair to the people who are listening to us on RBN and our on-air affiliates, and we need to be fair to them. So, getting on back to the news here. There is this ongoing war between Donald Trump and the corporate media, but the corporate media started it. The corporate media started this last year. And the corporate media came out of the election saying, all right, well, you know, we lost this one. Bygones are bygones. We're still the head of the line at the White House press corps. And Trump said, no, you are not. And nobody can really blame him for that. So the corporate media is out there trying to say, we're the real news. All those other people are the fake news. And you should never, you can't even have a democracy without us telling people what to think, which is what George W. Bush was saying. And now Justice Ginsburg is saying exactly the same thing. So, what their idea of a free press is, their control press. They want freedom of the press because they own the presses. They can't deal with a peer-to-peer sharing of information, because then we start pointing out where the government is behaving badly, which was supposed to be the traditional role of the corporate media. Now then, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. George in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. I hear you.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I almost hit the call waiting button. Anyway, I watched the show last. I'm watching a beginning made-for-TV series. It's on ABC. It's called When We Rise. And I bet you this mini-series, I think, is really a miscalculation of broadcasting it. For the reason is Donald Trump reversed the executive order on transgender bathroom policy. It is portraying the homosexual movement in the early years in San Francisco, making the gay and lesbian community look like they're innocent and we can do no wrong. And those evil police and city governments are standing in their way. And I can really sense, and I can tell you, this is not a show I would recommend you watch with the family, especially children.
Okay.
If they're going to have a When We Rise television miniseries, why don't we have it on the anti-war movement? You know what I mean? Not the gay and lesbian struggle.
I would agree with you on that, but again, they're trying. It's like I said. It's like the campaign hasn't stopped just because we had the actual election and Donald Trump won. They're still out there with trying to fan up these fringe issues about LGBT and gay rights and abortion and all, trying to keep us divided against each other. It really is beginning to look like they're still campaigning as if the election hasn't happened. And I don't know what the end game of this is. More and more people are concerned that Soros is trying to stir up a color revolution in this country to pull down Donald Trump and install Hillary Clinton. It's very alarming that all of a sudden she's going through the effort to stay in the public eye. She's cranking out videos saying, we will persevere, we will do this, we will do that. And it is very, very alarming, because I'll tell you one thing right now. This country cannot survive both a civil war internally and foreign war with Russia and China at the same time. We'll simply pop, disappear completely.
Well, a good thing, when my congressman had a town hall meeting, he didn't have nothing to do with this, but a state trooper did. They were busting in the protesters for his town hall meeting, and the state trooper asked the bus driver to look at his logbook, and the people they were dragging into the town hall meeting weren't part of his district.
Well, we've been seeing, yeah, we've been seeing that all over. I mean, Soros is funding all these town hall disruptors, and yeah, these people going on into these town hall meetings are not from that congressman's district. They're outside agitators.
And the same thing is like in the city council meetings trying to push Agenda 21. We're sort of like having an escort, not silence people, but sort of like say you can listen, but, these are people trying to come in and try to say got the local population, but they don't belong to the city. They don't live in the city or the county. And, the thing is, I think the thing is, like, when you see these people bus in, just ask that bus driver, I'd like to see your logbook, see where you picked up these people. Like I said, they're not in your district. So basically, the bus had to leave. So, and, I just think we need to do our countermeasures.
Well, the best countermeasure is by pointing out to everybody that these disruptors are not your neighbors and friends. They're bussed in from outside. They're paid agent provocateurs. And it does look like Soros is considering trying to start a color revolution in this country. But it's doomed to fail, and I don't care how much money he puts into it. Because when you are trying to get a coup d'etat to overthrow a government, you have to have the popular support. And everything that Hillary and Soros have been doing since the election is damaging the brand. They're not going to get public sympathy. And a good example, of course, would be when they tried to stage a new coup in Iran back in 2009. And it fell apart because the Iranian people did not identify with the protesters. They did not support them. They had no sympathy for them. They came across as thugs and misbehaving idiots. And it all fell apart, and it's going to fall apart here. The only question is how much longer are they willing to pour George Soros money into this, and how much damage are they willing to inflict on the global image of the United States of America?
Well, they tried it after Putin was elected. You remember all the protests in Moscow, anti-Putin protests. I mean, that didn't go anywhere because he had overwhelming support from the Russian people.
That's exactly right. And then Putin turned around and found out all of those anti-Putin protests were bought and paid for, and he kicked out George Soros NGOs. And it's the beginning of a trend because Soros organizations are now being kicked out of Macedonia, Hungary, Serbia. The whole world is waking up and realizing just how much trouble this billionaire is causing with all of his money.
Well, another thing, are you hearing, a lot of the pedophile rings are starting getting broken up? And everybody's saying Trump ain't doing this, Trump ain't doing that. The thing is, and Trump giving the green light to law enforcement, breaking up the pedophile rings, that is the Achilles heel for the establishment. And believe me, in a chess game, the best thing you could do is knock out the pawns, in the lower level, before you go after the big fish.
Oh, that's absolutely, that's always a good strategy, work from the bottom up. Unless you have the capability of a decap strike. Anyway, listen, George, we're going to let you go here. We're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. I am getting email from people saying that they are, in fact, able to see me on BAM User. I don't know why it's blocked in certain areas of the countries. I just paid the money to BAM User that I have to pay every month to keep this video stream going. And why it's not reaching some of you, I don't know. But these days, the spoiled children are out there with their little laptops trying to cause as much ruckus as they can. And so I'm just going to chalk this up to yet another tantrum by those who cannot deal with reality. Let's see. 2 more calls, then we're going to get back to the news here. D in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, how we doing?
Doing fine.
Yeah. All right. I was wondering if you guys talked about, if you've talked about yet, the Obama, how he was stealing money from Fannie and Freddie to pay for his Obamacare.
Well, that was a little further down. That was a little further down in the talking points. But yeah, Obamacare was a disaster almost from day one between the online website and not being able to get the exchanges up and running. And yes, Obama did in fact dip into the cash surpluses at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to keep this going, just like President Bill Clinton dipped into the Social Security Retirement Fund to make his magic federal government surplus.
Right, and then you notice you don't hear really a peep from the mainstream media, do you?
No, of course not.
Trump stubs his toe, and it's oh gosh, or Kellyanne's got her feet on the couch, and it's all over the front page. One more thing I had, what do you think they're going to do when he gives his congressional speech as far as heckling? You think someone's going to yell at him?
Yeah, I think so.
He's not going to turn that around on whoever. Like he's not going to turn it around and then make them look like fools. Like what do these people think? This guy thinks on his feet. I don't understand what they're thinking here.
Well, the problem is if Trump is heckled, if Trump responds to the heckling, I can guarantee you the corporate media will edit it to make him look as bad as possible, and they'll probably lay in some additional booing and jeering on the soundtrack as well, because that's basically how they operate. And I think Trump's best course of action would be to make his speech, present it carefully. If anybody gets too out of control there in the gallery, security will just escort them out. But Trump can't bite. Yeah. He can't sink down to their level.
Gotcha. Well, that's all I had, Mike. Enjoy the show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Steve in California. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, you just mentioned the Affordable Care Act. I saw a video floating around with Nancy Pelosi and how she was spinning it as a positive thing. That was a great thing for the American people, but I don't know how you can call something where your premiums go up 30 to 70% as a success story. This woman is quite delusional, and that she could actually be a cheerleader for this failure of a program.
Well, the question is how many of these health insurance corporations are donating to her political campaign or her foundation, for all we know. The reality is Obamacare was a disaster. It certainly did not help to make health care affordable to the American people with the skyrocketing premiums, and not only that, the skyrocketing deductibles, which meant most Americans, unless they had a serious illness or accident, were still paying cash out of pocket for their medical care for the entire year because they couldn't reach that deductible. And it was a giveaway to the health insurance companies, but so many people stayed out of it because they couldn't afford it. The health insurance companies got into trouble. And everybody's screaming, bail out, bail out, bail out. Then there was that embarrassment over the website to enroll people in Obamacare. What a disaster that was, how much money they spent on it, and it still didn't work properly. And I think Obamacare is not just an example of the failures of the Obama administration, but the inability of the federal government as a whole to actually accomplish anything meaningful.
Yeah.
Okay?
I agree. Hey, another topic real quick. Got a big jet flying over my head here. I'm looking at the definition of subversion, and its definition is the undermining of the power and authority of an established system or institution. That's clearly what George Soros is doing. I would love it if President Donald Trump, would send over some authorities and really shake up George Soros and basically shut him down, because what he is doing is subversion.
Well, it's not just subversion. He's in violation of the USA Patriot Act and a whole bunch of other laws. And I think the only reason he hasn't been prosecuted so far is everybody knows he's got enough money to keep the cases tied up in court for the rest of his life, which, given that he's as old as he is not going to be all that long anyway. But, yeah, Soros he's turning out to be a supervillain like you'd find in a James Bond movie, or again, going on back to the movie Billion Dollar Brain with Michael Caine. George Soros could be that Texas billionaire who wanted to start war with Russia all on his own. And it's a reminder that people with way too much money pose a serious threat to peace on Earth, because Soros is not elected. None of us gave him our permission to mess about with our lives and our planets the way he's doing it. And Soros, if he keeps acting like this, he's going to bring about a true socialist revolution, because ordinary people aren't going to trust anybody to have too much money out of fear of what they're going to do.
I would love to see Donald Trump pull that Reagan move that he did with PATCO, the air traffic controllers, and just basically shut him down, call him out and shut him down. That would be a bold move. I think he would win a lot of fans if he did that, but he needs to end this guy's his quest of undermining the government and the policies of this country.
I think it would be a good thing for him to do, not just because of Soros, but because right now Trump is fighting this war with the media and the establishment the way the media and establishment want it to be fought, and that means he's lost the initiative. He's got to break out and get in front and establish once and for all he is the president, and it's time to let all this other nonsense fade into the past. That's where we are. Anyway, Steve, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We're going to be coming on back talking about more news. There's some interesting developments. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And very alarming news. We are hearing a report from Alex Jones that he is being sued over the Pizzagate story. And apparently he's released his full Pizzagate video, putting that out there, and I have to be honest, the look on his face is not good. Now, when that whole Comet Ping Pong Pizza thing first broke, it just didn't feel right, partly because my email inbox was just flooded with all these emails. You must put this story up immediately. You must do this. That's always a red warning sign you're being fed something. And so I was very cautious, and I'm not denying that there is a segment of our society that is seriously mentally ill and gets their jollies having sex with children. But it felt like this specific story was being set up to entrap people and open them up to lawsuits, and it looks like it may be happening to Alex Jones. And we're all going to have to pull around and support him, because as Ben Franklin said when they signed the Declaration of Independence, we must all hang together, or most assuredly we will all hang separately. Now, I don't have all the details about the lawsuit itself, but apparently it is a serious, serious issue, and we need to keep a very, very close eye on that. And as I mentioned before, we in the independent media have to be very careful, because the corporate media literally is at war with us, and they have that mindset, all fair in war. Any dirty trick, hacking the servers, setting us up to be humiliated, setting us up to be sued, they call it lawfare. That's the term of crap. We're going to commit lawfare against them and just sue them out of existence. Even if the lawsuits are totally frivolous, they can drive you into bankruptcy on the legal fees. So I hope Alex is able to deal with this. And again, we have to be very careful. We have to follow good journalistic principles out here. Multiple sources, confirmation. We don't just report rumors and innuendo from anonymous sources. Double check everything. And always remember that throughout history, anybody who ever got lied to, betrayed, or used had it done to them by somebody they thought they could trust. And I know it sounds like a recipe for cynicism, and yes, it is, because no matter how cynical I get, I just can't keep up with these guys. Now, Chelsea Clinton, who is still angling for a potential run for Congress, is working to keep herself in the public eye, just like her mother is with all these videos coming on out. And Chelsea Clinton is out there on Twitter establishing her presence and building her followers. And apparently she decided to go on the attack about how disgusted she was at the birther attacks on Barack Obama during his time in office. Oh, it was terrible for them to say that he wasn't born in Hawaii and all the rest of it. And unfortunately, she apparently was unaware that that whole birther controversy was started by her mother's campaign. And Mike Cernovich basically came back onto the Twitter feed and said, you need to remember this was your mother's doing. Because in last September, Hillary Clinton's 2008 campaign manager admitted the birther rumor was started by the Hillary Clinton campaign. And if you will remember when that came on out, I told you that was a hoax. Barack Obama was a love child from the 60s. There's a lot of them around. And we have reasons to not like former President Obama or approve of what he did, but the circumstances of his birth are certainly outside his control. You can't hold that against him, and you shouldn't. So Chelsea kind of put her foot in it. She's proving herself to be rather out of touch and clueless, just like her mother was. And she's not getting a lot of support from the current Democratic establishment. The Clinton brand is damaged. Damaged goods. They don't want to invest another huge campaign on another Clinton that's going to go down in flames. It's going to self-destruct. So, story coming out of governmentslaves.info. Soros finance groups provided the script for the anti-Trump town halls. More about this when we come back from this next commercial break. And aloha America, welcome back to our show today. And we are just now getting word, apparently there is a major internet outage here in the United States, especially on the East Coast. and apparently there is a massive outage in Amazon Web Services that is preventing people from getting to certain web pages, preventing people from seeing the BAM user stream, and Amazon is reporting increased error rates, which is polite speech for something seriously being broken. But apparently this is a major problem, and that certainly explains why people were having difficulty accessing my BAM user stream. And so that's what's going on over there. Now, before the commercial break, we were talking about how George Soros has one of their groups, the Revolutionary Love Project, distributed an actual script of anti-Trump talking points for citizens to use when meeting with constituents in town halls. And the script provides literally word-for-word language that accused the Trump administration of xenophobia, racism, and Islamophobia. And it directs the activists to use the descriptors to petition the representatives to forcefully condemn and support legislation opposing President Trump's immigration and border security agendas. In other words, this is not a grassroots movement against Trump's agenda. This is a bought and paid for series of agent provocateurs. And what you need to do to counteract this is very simple. Call your local representatives' offices and just leave a message with whoever answers saying that you are aware that the people showing up at the town halls opposing Donald Trump's immigration policies are being paid to be there. It's like I said before, it's almost as if the election never happened. They're still out there campaigning. Now let's turn over here to the war zones, because apparently Secretary of Defense James Mattis has presented his preliminary plan to defeat ISIS to the Trump administration. Now the question is this really a plan to go after ISIS? And I think it may be, and that stands in stark contrast with the policy under Obama, which was to bomb other people's countries claiming to be after ISIS but never actually hitting them. We saw that all over Syria. We're flying into your airspace without your permission because we're conducting the war on terror on ISIS, and we're going to bomb ISIS. Whoops, sorry about that hospital. Sorry about that food storage facility. Sorry about those oil pipelines and everything. Our pilots just have terrible eyesight here, but we're here with good intentions. And you should just go along with this. But it's looking like the new plan under Trump may be to actually go after ISIS themselves. And I think the reason I think that is because Donald Trump has directed the CIA to stop all material support to groups inside Syria trying to remove President Bashar al-Assad. And that may be the reason that John McCain did that panicked visit to Syria a week ago to meet with those rebel leaders to reassure them that somehow or other we'll get the weapons and money to you. And if McCain is not doing that with the authorization of the White House, he is in violation of the Logan Act, and he can and should go to jail. Trying to perpetuate a war that the president has decided it's time to wind down. Now, a former candidate for the U.S. Senate, Mark Dankoff, who's also a fellow broadcaster in San Antonio, Texas, is out there saying that he is convinced Israel is planning a false flag attack in the U.S. in order to create a war with Iran. Certainly cannot rule it out. We know that Israel was involved in that false flag that got us into the war with Iraq. And as I pointed out, over this last week, we're seeing a flood of all these stories about, oh, let's all feel sorry for Israel because the cemeteries are being desecrated and swastikas are being painted on things and there are telephone threats into all these people. Oh, see, our enemies are coming after us. You must stand with Israel against our enemy, which this time out apparently is going to be Iran. But it is a repeating pattern with Israel. When they start cranking out the Feel Sorry for Us brigade, something very, very nasty is about to happen. Now, we have been talking about the horrible quality of America's weapon systems. They're very expensive. It's almost like our medical care. Most expensive in the world, lousy in quality. We've been talking about the latest aircraft carrier, the Gerald R. Ford, that experts are now saying may never actually be usable in real combat. We've been talking about the F-22, still asphyxiating its pilots at high altitude. Apparently not as stealthy as anybody thought, anybody expected it to be. The problems with the F-35 are legion. Can't fly in the rain, can't fly in the fog. The software for the gun is still at least a year away. The helmet-mounted fire control system still can't integrate all the sensors properly. And it has a bad habit of blowing up its engines on takeoff because the insulation in the fuel tanks keeps flaking off. But it sure looks good sitting there at the air show, doesn't it? Wow, that's a very slick-looking airplane there. Then, of course, we have the Independence-class littoral combat ship with chronic corrosion problems. The lead ship's already been dry docked to have major hull replacement. The Freedom-class littoral combat ship, constant chronic drivetrain problems. The new Zumwalt stealth destroyer, chronic drivetrain problems, and on and on and on. The newest embarrassment has to do with the Homeland Missile Defense System. And the Pentagon is pushing ahead with an expansion of this anti-missile system, despite finding a deficiency that affects nearly all of the system's rocket interceptors. This is coming out of the Los Angeles Times. Now, apparently these interceptor rockets have these little tiny thrusters on them that allow them to be steered into where they think the incoming threat is going to be in the next few seconds. It's already been obsoleted by the fact that Russia and China are now using maneuverable reentry vehicles, which obsoletes any form of ballistic prediction. But setting that small technicality aside, apparently the thrusters don't work properly, which means those interceptors are going to go on up, and they're going to miss their intended target, even if it was following a predictable ballistic path. But it's good money, so the Pentagon is moving forward with this, even knowing that this thing may not work if it actually comes to a nuclear war. Because the military-industrial complex, just like the medical-industrial complex, is after money. They don't care about the quality of what they're doing as long as the money continues to roll on in. Now, over at the United Nations Security Council, Russia and China have vetoed a bid to have a Security Council resolution imposing more sanctions on Syria for the alleged use of toxic gas by Bashar al-Assad on his citizens, which is an accusation the U.S. has been making as regular as clockwork and has never been able to back it up. The UN's own chemical weapons inspectors have said these chemical attacks have come from the rebels to frame Bashar al-Assad. So China and Russia vetoed it. That one's dead. And apparently the backlash from Russia and China doing that is that the sanctions against Russia are going to be continued if the United States has anything to say about it. And basically, Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev is saying Russia should prepare to live under U.S. sanctions indefinitely. But the good news is the country is able to develop in these conditions well. See, here's where the sanctions have backfired. First of all, for sanctions to work, Russia must need something from the United States. Investment capital, agricultural produce, manufactured goods, and in turn, Russia must be having something that they're selling that the U.S. will buy. That's all that sanctions do. It cuts off that economic communication. But if Russia doesn't want to buy America's overpriced, poorly performing products, and Russia most assuredly is not going to buy our GMO agriculture, then what is going to happen is that Russia, under these sanctions, starts to becoming more self-sufficient. And that's exactly what's happened. This global commerce model, which was part of the foundation of the New World Order, one world government, is already breaking down. Instead of trade across the globe and having all the agriculture here and all the electronics there and all the cars over here and all the clothing over here, countries are going back to the model of providing what they need within their own borders. And that's another reason why Putin is on the top of the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list. He's not playing by the rules we decided for him. Sanctions actually have an upside. They are encouraging nations to become more independent and more self-sufficient. That's a good thing. Now, there's a story coming out of Journal Neo where the U.S. Navy has issued a new report about its plans for military activity here in the Pacific Ocean. And just as was the case in World War II, the report is talking about power projection over to the western side of the Pacific. The U.S. Navy isn't focused on defending America's shores, but imposing America's will onto foreign shores. And so the U.S. Navy's own report indicates the Pentagon agenda is looking for a fight here in the Pacific, which of course makes me very nervous since I'm looking out over here at the wreck of the Arizona. Now, turning to the economic news, a former White House budget director has warned that, as near as he can tell, the U.S. Treasury is literally going to run out of cash middle of this year. And apparently, according to this interview with David Stockman, there was a controversial deal made between former Speaker of the House John Boehner and former President Barack Obama, which is resulting in the mother of all debt ceiling crisis by this summer. And there will be a giant fiscal bloodbath for Americans. And what continues to absolutely amaze me is how all these world leaders and these bankers are totally oblivious to a simple truth. Under the model of private central banking, debt grows faster than the available money supply. It's designed that way. No matter how hard you work, no matter how much you sacrifice, you can never pay that debt off. And the bankers use that awareness of debt to enslave you. Small-scale debt can be used to collect and organize pools of money for projects that benefit the community. Your basic mom-and-pop depositor bank. Everybody has a savings account. The money's loaned out to build a new store in town. That's a positive side of banking. This scam of allowing a privately owned central bank to create the nation's currency and loan it into circulation at interest is a system of robbery. It's basically legalized counterfeiting. And the instant that first pretty printed piece of paper goes into circulation, more money is owed to that private central bank than actually exists. And there's no way to reverse that. And the private central bankers have been playing this scam on the human race for 300 years. I think that's long enough. What is amazing is that no politician has the courage to stand up to them since John Kennedy. Why are people so afraid of bankers? Look at all these pensions that are in trouble. And the people who are retiring and they're not getting the benefits they paid into to get, and nobody will stand up and say, well, Wall Street did this back in 2008. It's always, oh, you're retiring too early. You have too many demands. You're eating too much. Get used to eating canned dog food. Why don't you? Go away and leave us alone. Counting our money. Now, as that caller into the show earlier indicated, federal court litigation has provided evidence that the Obama administration illegally diverted taxpayer funds that had not been appropriated by Congress to keep Obamacare from imploding. Rented lips. Now remember, the way this country was set up, it's set up as a nation of laws that apply to everybody equally, including the president. Now, of course, Richard Nixon had a different idea. His idea was, if the president does it, then it's not a crime. It's not illegal if the president does it. No, that's not the way it's set up. It's not, certainly not in the Constitution, that the president is allowed to break the law. But again, just like was the case with President Bill Clinton, grabbing money that technically belongs to the American people to put into pet projects that they hope are going to work, and they fail miserably, as Obamacare has. We are living under bad government. And I don't mean bad as simply evil or selfish. We're talking bad as in unable to act, unable to do a good job. They're so hamstrung by factionalism and their own greed, they're not functioning as a good government would in terms of caring for the nation and its people. And as I've said before, we need a cash for clunkers law for the government, where we take our old, bloated, wasteful, inefficient government, we take it on down to the junkyard, we put it in the little machine and mashes it down to a crumpled metal coffee table, and we all get a check for $50,000 with which to buy a new, smaller, more cost-effective, more efficient government. We really do need that cash for clunker law at this point here. Now then, getting on to the issue of immigration, Trump's border wall plan is already working, and the wall isn't even built. Apparently, illegal immigration has dropped 27%, almost one-third in January over December. One-third! That's astounding! I think a big part of it is this awareness that, yeah, you can sneak into the U.S., but under Trump, you're going to get kicked back out. I think we ought to get those pumpkin-chunkin' guys with their air cannons down there on the border. Catch an illegal, shove them in the bore, and fling them back over. Trophies for the highest trajectory, longest reach, and the most bounces on landing. Get some entertainment value out of this. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about the immigration issue and the push by the New World Order to just blend everybody together to destroy any sense of a regional, cultural, or historic identity in order to make it easier to control us. Now, the fact that we have a president who's going to enforce the existing laws against illegal immigration, I think accounts for for the serious decline, almost one-third of illegal entry into this country in January versus December. And I'm willing to wager that when the numbers for this month come on in, it'll be even less. And, of course, the pro-immigration, pro-New World Order people are still out there screaming, "You're just being a racist. They have a right to come here." No, they don't. Read that Constitution. Nowhere in there does it say foreign nationals, citizens of foreign countries, have an automatic right to come across our borders. And there is a legal immigration path. And for those who follow it, welcome. I hope we're not a disappointment, because you're coming to America to see the country that is portrayed in American-made movies and TV shows. And I hate to tell you this, but a lot of that is special effects. Still getting emails from people screaming, "Oh, you're racist." Well, newsflash, illegal is not a race. Now, apparently down in Mexico, the Catholic Church has declared that protecting your borders is terrorism. It's an act of terrorism that Donald Trump is committing. Now, by the way, if you look at Mexico's southern border, they got a heck of a fence down there. And they have very strict immigration laws in Mexico. If you step into Mexico without the permission of the Mexican government, you are going to jail. And then they'll fling you back over the border. This idea that the border should be open one way from Mexico into the U.S. but not the other sort of underscores the hypocrisy of this whole pro-immigration movement. And the reality is that the vast majority of these illegal immigrants and the refugees coming to the United States of America are not finding the better life they were expecting. Most are on social services. Most have not been able to find a job. Just like over 90 million legal American citizens willing and able to work have not been able to find jobs for months, if not years. It is not an act of terrorism to secure our borders. It's an act of common sense. Now, the pro-immigration people are saying, oh, but you should feel sorry for these people. Conditions in their country are so terrible. I have a response to that after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Let's get a few phone calls going here and talk about what's going on here. And before we went to the station break, I was talking about how the pro-immigration, pro-refugee people are out there saying, we should feel sorry for these individuals. Conditions in their country are so bad, we should let them in. I have an alternative suggestion. Why don't they stay in their country and work to make things better? When we were all dealing with the presidencies of the Clintons, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, did we all leave the country, go down to Mexico and say, let us in? Things are kind of terrible. No, we stayed like good American patriots, and we worked to change the course of the nation. Now, yes, conditions are terrible in their home countries. And yes, in some cases, it is directly the fault of the United States government. But running to another part of the world is not going to be the solution. One of the reasons there has been so much violence in Europe from the refugees is they're realizing they did not, in fact, find a better life in Europe. They're, for the most part, unemployed. They're marginalized. And they're acting out. They're taking it out. Okay, let's take a phone call. Pat in Vermont, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you. Hi, Michael. Regarding immigration, I don't understand, well, I do understand under our past administration how, let me just turn this off, forgive me. They could be just, turning people around, and then they come back, half a dozen times, and we find out they're murderers and they've been committing crimes, and innocent people are dying once they get back. Why not treat them like terrorists? If they come back and they've already been convicted, why not just take them under a military panel, take them out in the back, and put a bullet in their head? I mean, what's the problem with that? Well,
I think the best solution is to really just not let them get that far into the country. But under the Obama administration, Immigration and Customs Enforcement were basically said, hands off. Your job is to take care of the underage immigrants and refugees, many of whom turned out to not actually be underage. And they were turned away from being a border control force into basically taxpayer-funded babysitters.
Right.
Because Obama was fully on board with this New World Order agenda, which has to erase a sense of national identity. And that's why every one of these sovereignty movements that we're seeing, Make America Great or Brexit, comes under immediate attack by the globalists. How dare you dream of having your own country to yourself? What's wrong with you people? We're here to take all the people of planet Earth and put them into a giant blender and hit puree, and out will pour a planet full of easily controlled slaves.
I just don't think you can fight fire with, pillow fights. I mean, we've got gang members coming in, and, an entry into the gang is to kill somebody, to rape somebody. And these people are coming in, they're known gang members, and they're definitely of that ilk. Then they've got 3, 4, 5, a half a dozen convictions, and we throw them back over the border, and then they sneak back? Nah, I'm sorry. Somewhere along the line, somebody has to say, these are terrorists now. And how would you treat a terrorist in the war? Are you going to keep letting them go back and fight against us, or are you going to just take them out and, not throw them in jail for the rest of their lives? We shouldn't have to pay for 50 years. But a bullet. It's simple.
Well, it is a little extreme. It is a little extreme, but I remember there was this case a while ago where an illegal immigrant committed some crime, and he'd been deported 19 times already, which is as much a failure of the government to enforce the borders. Now, as a historical precedent, I want to go back to President Eisenhower's term in office, where he ran Operation Wetback, which would be denounced as racist in
Sure.
today's corporate media. But he was able to literally shut down illegal immigration, and he only had 1/10 of the manpower at his disposal as today's Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So if Eisenhower can do it, it can be done. And
I don't think he had the same fight from the people. I mean, our people are so insane relative to, extreme liberalism. It's incredible.
Well, liberalism is one thing, but you need to remember there are already laws on the books here. They've been there for many, many years. All you have to do is start enforcing them. Under Title 8, harboring, employing, or encouraging an illegal immigrant means you are going to go to jail. You start throwing some of these people in prison, this problem is going to start correcting itself. I applaud the governor of Texas, who has responded to all these Texas cities, we're going to be sanctuary cities, by saying if you, as mayor of these cities, declare a sanctuary city and refuse to cooperate with federal immigration orders, you're going to go to jail. I'm going to put you in jail.
That reminds me of another point regarding this, complicity. When a judge lets somebody out, 6 months for rape, something of that sort, and then they go out and they do it again and they do it again, when are we going to start holding the judges accountable? When are we going to start holding the people that are maintaining the problem accountable?
Whatever happened to the 3 strikes law?
Well, the problem is they applied that to the poor and to the people that weren't committing vicious crimes. They got the potheads off the streets, and meanwhile the government's importing heroin. So I don't like the 3 strikes law because it's blind. It has to have some intelligence associated to it. But when a murderer gets out, or a rapist gets out prematurely, anything, in America, convicted of the same thing is going away for whatever, 5-10 years. These guys sometimes get out for 6 months and then they get deported and then they come back and they do it again. I'm sorry, somewhere along the line, we have to hold the judges accountable. We have to hold the mayors accountable that are hiding and harboring these people.
I have an idea.
We can't keep. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have an idea. The gun grabbers are always saying that when somebody commits a crime with a gun, that the people who manufactured the gun or sold the gun ought to be held as accessories to that crime. Let's take that one step further. Let's say that an illegal immigrant sneaks into this country, and maybe they've been deported several times before, but they're let back in, and they commit a murder. Is not Immigrations and Customs Enforcement therefore criminally liable for what happened under that same gun grabber logic? Maybe the idea is for people whose family members have been killed or raped by these illegal immigrants to start filing suit against the government to saying, you're not doing your job. You are not doing the job we, the American people, hired you to do, and we're going to take you to court. And I understand sovereign immunity, and we can do whatever we want, and just because it's your money doesn't mean you get to tell us how it's going to be spent. But we really do need to start reasserting our control over the government. And the most vulnerable point of the government right now is for everybody to start focusing on its obvious failure to do its various jobs.
Not only that, but then we take them to court, we win, and who pays? The taxpayer pays.
Well,
so even when we win, we lose.
Well, at the very least, we could talk about, getting some more publicity for the fact that all that we're dealing with here is a failure of government and a failure of government policy, just like it is in Europe.
I think it's a job opportunity. I think we should be taking these returning veterans, especially these SEAL trains and these Ranger trains and some of these Marines that are exquisitely trained, make them into Texas Rangers, open up a bounty hunter program, get them certified, get them licensed, get them throughout the country, round these suckers up and throw them out the window and give them a license to kill if they need it.
Well, it sounds like a really, really good idea, but in the end, if we cut off the economic assistance to the illegals, they're not going to come here anymore. If we enforce the laws against employing illegal immigrants, if we simply declare illegal immigrants, people who do not have a legal right to be here, are not allowed to avail themselves of food stamps or welfare or any other kind of social services because those services exist for the American people. And those with the legal permission.
But I'm not talking just about illegals, sir. I'm talking about illegal criminals. I mean, I think, open up your borders to the people that really want to get here, that can add to the country's well-being. But if they've got a criminal record, if they've got a repeat criminal history, we have no place for them. We have enough criminals of our own. And the roundup that I'm talking about has to be against the criminals and not just against people that are just illegal. I mean, if they're illegal, I think we should be able to take them and say, okay, here's your choice. You can go back home and you've got this strike against you, or you can go through the process and this is the process and there'll be no penalty. I'm not trying to break up families and I'm not trying to do anything other than turn down the violence.
Okay, Pat.
We've got to use.
Pat.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you are not breaking up the families. Okay, those families that are sending family members across the border are making that decision and taking that risk that they're going to be broken up. And what they're trying to do is to make Americans somehow feel responsible for the bad decisions made by these refugees, immigrants coming across the border. Now, again, there's always been a legal way to be a U.S. citizen, which does maintain that authority to decide, will this person be a benefit to our culture and our society or not? And to simply say, yeah, we think you're a cool person, you can come on in, start a business, and hope for the best. As far as the criminal illegal immigrants, let's just treat them like criminals. And especially these MS-13 people. But again, we need to close the border, and then we need to basically cut off the economic support of people who have committed a crime simply by stepping foot across that border, and the problem will go away. Because it's one thing for them to risk arrest coming across the border when they're seeing at the end of the rainbow a pot full of food stamps and welfare payments and other goodies, and quite another thing where they're stepping across the border into a country in which they know up front there is no way for them to get the money they need to live on.
These criminals are running guns, they're running drugs, they're running anything they can get into this country illegally to make money. They're not just typical criminals. They shouldn't be treated like typical criminals if you're an American criminal. They should be treated like terrorists. And as far as I'm concerned, we need to...
I would just be happy if they were treated like criminals. But unfortunately, under the Obama administration, the doors were open and anybody could come on in and look at all the problems it's causing. We're not to the same place where Europe is, but we're headed that direction unless we close those borders off.
And close down the complicity factor. I mean, when people are actually aiding and abetting these criminals, where's the enforcement of the law there? So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And we're going to take a phone call from Peter in Los Angeles. Peter, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Michael. Just to glom on to what the gentleman before me was talking about the criminals and all that. I mean, it's a no-brainer. If you're in trouble with the police, if you're fleeing from the law in Mexico, if you're in a gang war and you lose, if you're in trouble of any kind, we hit the dregs. They come here. And maybe what we should do is round these guys up and put them on chain gangs. I'm talking about the criminals. Have them actually dig the foundation for the wall.
Ooh, I like that. That's a good idea. That's a good idea. I like that one.
And make it hard, really hard labor. And then when we're done, we just kick their butts on the other side of the...
Oh, I got one even better than that. While they're out there digging on the foundation for the wall, put a webcam on them and live stream it back into Mexico.
I'm all for that. And you know, after so many times of them coming over, it should be a capital offense, frankly. If they commit a capital crime up here, they should be not subject to any of the appeals processes or anything like that. If they're convicted, they should go down and go down right away.
Well, again, given that they're illegal immigrants, I'm not sure that they actually have any kind of a right to any of the civil protections under the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Because the Constitution and the Bill of Rights is for the American citizenry and those who are legally allowed to live here. It's not a guarantee of fair treatment by the U.S. government against people in other parts of the world, in particular Syria, Iran, Iraq, and all these other countries that hate us. If they were pouring across our border, we would treat them as an invading enemy and treat them as such. We wouldn't say, come on in, put your bomb down for a second here, and let's read you your Bill of Rights.
Well, all those draconian, horrible anti-terrorist laws where the president can draw a line through any of our names and make us disappear forever, you know what? If there's a capital criminal, a criminal from a Mexican mafia person or MS-13 or whatever they might be, and they're here illegally and they commit a capital crime, they should be treated like terrorists and summarily executed, frankly.
Well, it's certainly an extreme position here, but again, rather than having that kind of activity going on in the streets of America where innocent bystanders can be harmed, I would rather simply have the border shut down. And again, Eisenhower did it with only 10% of the border patrol force that we have today. And if Eisenhower can do it with those limited resources, Trump can certainly do it, not only with the larger workforce, but the added remote sensing technology that we can, instead of having TV cameras watching the law-abiding American citizens, let's put them down on that fence and watch for people approaching from Mexico.
Sure, with thermal imaging and ground surveillance radar and helicopters. And you know what? Shoot to kill. You come over and you're trying to broach our defenses, broach our fences, and you're hailed and you do not stop, then, we should open fire.
I'm not sure I'm willing to go. I'm not sure I'm willing to go to that extreme, but definitely something has to be done, or we're going to wind up just like Europe.
Huh? Absolutely.
No, I agree. The part I'm drawing the line at is shoot to kill, because, and again, this is the way I was raised with firearms. You don't pull that trigger unless your own personal life is an immediate threat. So that's why I draw the line there. But there's tear gas, pepper spray. There's all kinds of things that can be used to keep these people under control while they're bundled into a truck and sent back down. And at some point, I think we would be justified, and Trump was talking about this. These are Mexican citizens. We should basically sue the government of Mexico for all the costs of trying to control the border. Because if Mexico's not going to control their border, we'll be happy to do it for them, but they got to pay the bills.
Well, the problem is making them pay the bill.
Okay.
But you know what? We're going to have to do it because they won't pay the bill.
Well, then we go back to my original plan, which is we put crocodiles in the Rio Grande.
Mike, can I bring one more thing up really quickly?
Sure.
There's a school. There's several schools here in Los Angeles. They have the API ratings where the kids, take achievement tests, and if you score above 800 out of a possible 1,000, you get an award. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a couple schools in Hancock Park that have, I'm sure you know Hancock Park, it's an affluent area, that have high scores, 950, the highest scores in the city. And they are being now they're being, frankly, invaded by the charter schools. Charter schools came about in L.A. because it's the public school people who the public schools are failing because there are too many illegal aliens, right?
Yes. Which
make up 25 to 30% of the enrollment of L.A. Unified School System. So they'll go to charter schools to try to get out. They can't get out of their neighborhoods. They try to make a charter. Well, now finally the charters are coming to Hancock Park, and where the parents are very involved, very affluent, very, very educated, and have contributed every year hundreds of thousands of dollars above and beyond what the LA Unified gives them, because they're not what's called a Title I school, which is below the poverty line,
yes,
where they get extra fund, which basically are illegal alien schools. And so now they're running out of space, the illegal alien schools, and so they're going to put these charter schools co-located with highly functioning schools, and bringing those down. And the point I want to make is if a public school in a place like Hancock Park with the affluent, wealthy, educated, involved, engaged parents, where they contribute hundreds of thousands a year above and beyond, can't make it, which if this happens and they co-locate these charter schools, if they can't make it, then public schools are done for in the United States because we can't afford to educate these illegal aliens.
No, we can't. We can't afford anything. Look at California's crumbling infrastructure, and yet Governor Moonbeam there is out there still spending $28 million a year taking care of people who should not even be there at all.
Right. And by the way, they get in-state tuition if they go to school, and if they go to California colleges or junior colleges, they get in-state tuition. They get all this stuff. They don't pay anything. They're in a cash economy for the most part.
Boy, I remember when I went to college in California, I had to pay my own way. I didn't have any scholarships or any kind. Well, I had one scholarship, but I had no financial assistance. They were willing to offer to loan me money, and I wound up paying for college as a professional magician. But there was no state agency out there saying, "Here, have some money to get your education." Anyway, listen, Peter, we got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Phone number 800-313-9443. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, here in Hawaii, of course, we have a major problem with homelessness. Claire and I are involved in 2 different programs to try and keep people fed and cared for. In deference to that caller from yesterday's show, we don't see any mysterious vans rolling around our streets, grabbing up the homeless and making them go away. In fact, the problem is continuing to get worse and worse. Part of it is we have discovered small towns in the U.S. that only have a few homeless. They'll give them a one-way ticket to Hawaii because, after all, we're a liberal state. We're a blue state. We'll take them all in and, you know, just take care of them, even though the state right now is hovering on the edge of bankruptcy. And the light rail project overages are not helping to that. But there are some good people out here, and it is a serious problem. And believe it or not, Claire and I learned something when we were involved with food distribution. Contrary to what you may see in the corporate media, a lot of these people don't deserve to be out there. We had a big problem when our economy started really tanking after TSA throttled our tourism economy, is people would come out here, and it costs a lot to get here, and they would come on out here because they've been offered a job, and then all of a sudden the job would go away because the company that hired them got into trouble and fell apart. And they were left here on Oahu without enough money to go back where they'd come from. And it's very common driving along the residential areas to see what we call bailout piles, which is where somebody has literally taken the entire contents of their household and put it out on the curb for trash pickup because all they can afford are the plane tickets to get back to the mainland, and they're leaving everything else behind. And it's rather tragic to see. So we do have a lot of homeless, and the state government basically tries to shoo them out of Waikiki because it makes the tourists are nervous to see all these tents and homeless people around there. But there's a new idea that's being proposed, and it's having to do with looking at the actual costs of what's going on. So it all started apparently where there was this homeless gentleman, Stephen Williams, who was found. He's been living in Chinatown, and he collapsed on the sidewalk. The ambulance arrived. His temperature was 104 degrees. They took him into the hospital. The hospital cost $40,000, paid for by Medicaid. And over the past 4 years, he's been to the hospital for infections 21 times, a consequence of psoriasis flare-ups in a humid climate matched with unsanitary conditions. So this idea has been proposed that it might be cheaper in the case of these medically fragile homeless to actually prescribe them a home. And they're looking at the numbers and saying it may actually be less expensive to provide housing for the homeless than it is to maintain care for them while they're living on the streets. And it's a good idea, and it's also not original. There have been other cities that have looked at the situation and said, you know, to heck with spending all this money for police and security and ambulance and all the rest of it. Let's get them into some kind of housing and see if we can get them back into the job market, which is not going to be very easy here in Hawaii because we have the same problem with mass unemployment than anybody else. But at least it's a change of the paradigm. And it's thinking about, instead of simply disposing these human beings, of finding a way to be polite, recycling them back into society. Because one thing Claire and I learned, you know, there are young people out there, young people with kids, people with skills and training. They didn't make themselves homeless. They didn't do anything to deserve what happened to them. It was done to them by the greed of the money junkies and government intractability. Now then, do you remember Target? Target is in serious trouble, as is the case with so many retailers, because ordinary people like you and I, we don't have a lot of money to go down to the stores and buy things with. Because all the money is concentrated up at the top, and for some reason, our government and our... Whoops. Caught me by surprise there. All right, when we come back, we're going to be talking about Target. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about Target. And like most retailers, they are in trouble. because all of the nation's wealth is concentrated at the very tippy top, and there aren't enough of those money junkies to go around to all the shopping malls and buy up all the consumer goods to keep the consumer economy running. And that's just a hard reality nobody seems to want to face up. Target, however, is suffering more than other retailers, and apparently their profits have fallen 43%. And surveys of Target customers are showing that, along with not having money, a big issue was Target's political correctness in going along with this nonsense about transgender bathrooms, and some guy can use the ladies' room just by claiming that he identifies as a girl inside. Myself, I'm a lesbian trapped in a man's body. But I digress. But that was really the issue. People are just fed up with political correctness, and it's not just Target. We were talking the other day about how Starbucks brand has been seriously damaged when they came out and announced they were going to start hiring the refugees over and above legal American citizens. Political correctness has had its day. Thank goodness, because political correctness is just cultural Marxism. It was an attempt to trick people of their own free will into surrendering their right to freedom of speech, to say what they think, what they believe, to express their honest opinions about what is going on in the world. Oh, you can't say that. That's politically incorrect. That's politically incorrect. Now, over in the European Union, they have now voted to censor politically incorrect speech. Europe has just become a true dictatorship with no freedom of speech. You're only allowed to speak if you go along with the politically correct agenda, even if you disagree. I think that's extreme. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call now from Alex in Florida. Aloha, Alex. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Not much, Michael. What do you think the chances are of Alex Jones actually maybe getting into the 650,000 emails that were found on Wiener's computer as part of the evidence for his defense against the lawsuit about Pizzagate?
Well, I think those emails ought to be released anyway, especially the ones involving the State Department, which weren't supposed to be on that machine to begin with. But I don't know the exact details of the lawsuit, whether it's a defamation lawsuit. Apparently it has something to do with the individual who threatened the pizza parlor with a shotgun. And I don't have all the fine details yet. I didn't have the time to go through his entire video presentation. But I do know that he is being sued over some aspect of his reporting on Pizzagate. And how he will mount a defense is determined solely by what kind of a lawsuit it is. If it's a defamation lawsuit, I think we pretty much recognize that Alex Jones and InfoWars and Prison Planet counts as a media organization, and the absence of malice defense, I think, would definitely work. But here is the problem. Even if Alex is able to successfully defend himself from this lawsuit, it's still going to cost him a huge amount of money in litigation. And like I said, the new term of craft we're seeing from the establishment of the corporate media is lawfare. Lawfare. It's a parody on warfare, in which they basically take you to court as many times as they can in order to drive you into bankruptcy with legal fees. And that may be where they're going, and they're going to try and bring down Alex Jones to send a warning to the rest of the independent media to sit down and shut up and stop getting in the way of the New World Order.
Yeah, we need to sue the corporate media for suppression of information. They select all the non-news stuff to report on, and they also report on lies, and it's kind of disgusting. And as far as the homeless people, you were talking about maybe prescribing them homes, which would be a great idea in my opinion. But what's so sad is if they owned a sports franchise like an NFL team, they get taxpayers to pay for their stadiums and stuff. And it's kind of gross that we have people out on the street while these freaking football teams, the NFL's not paying taxes. They're tax exempt, and they get tax money to build their arenas, and it's kind of disgusting. We need to quit watching
the rationale there, and I'm not taking the side of the NFL owners because I think they should be paying for their own stadiums. But the rationale is that if you build a really nice stadium and you have a home team there, it is going to stimulate the economy. People are going to be coming in from outside your city to attend the games, especially the big games toward the end of the season, and that will bring revenue into your economy. And it's certainly the mechanism here at the Aloha Bowl, where we have people literally flying in from all over the mainland, for that game as well. So that's the rationalization. I don't think it's really justified. But again, government is trying to run itself as a business. It doesn't act very business-like usually, and we've seen that not only with sports stadiums, but a lot of these Agenda 21 infrastructure projects. The light rail system here in Hawaii is in serious, serious trouble. It's still under construction. It's something like 3 years behind schedule. They were telling us that the construction just down here at the bottom of our hill was going to be over January 1st. It's still all torn up down there. It's terrible trying to drive on that damaged roadway, especially in a 17-year-old Honda. We're now learning that the insulating pads that hold those tracks on the top of the pylons are already starting to crack and are going to have to be replaced for the first 11 miles of the track, and probably eventually for all of it. They've just found out all of the cars that were ordered for the light rail are probably going to have to be completely replaced because of defects in these 4 I-beams that form the floor of the car, and they're made out of aluminum, and apparently it's less expensive to simply buy a new car than to try and tear these apart, replace the I-beams, and put them all back together. So it is a hideous, hideous mess, and Hawaii, the state of Hawaii is already hovering on the edge of bankruptcy, because TSA has absolutely crushed our tourist economy. I mean, especially if you drive up the leeward side, you will see all these resorts that used to be hugely successful, and they're all boarded up, and the golf courses are growing over. And it really is there's a lot of hardship here in the island, and as a result, Hawaii is in serious trouble. And I don't think they were well advised to make that economic bet on the light rail system, but this was all coming in from political correctness and liberalism and so forth and so on. As far as getting on back to Alex Jones and that situation, I certainly hope it's going to work out and resolve. But some corporate media are in fact being sued. We were reporting yesterday on how this $30 million defamation suit against CNN has been allowed to move forward by the judge, where they were caught lying about a hospital. Now, let me get back to that absence of malice defense. If you accidentally report something erroneously and they try and sue you, you can say, I didn't mean to do wrong, it was an honest mistake, and generally you'll get out of trouble that way. But if it can be proved you intentionally distorted the data, like Fox News did with that the Monsanto bovine growth hormone lawsuit, then absence of malice goes out the window, and you can sue for defamation, slander, libel, so forth and so on. And it is time to start holding the media to account. Now, you cannot sue the corporate media for their choosing which story they'll cover and which story they won't cover. That, unfortunately, is their prerogative as the owner of that media. But you can sue them if they intentionally misrepresent something. And there is a venue to go in and sue them. And some of the media right now don't have the economic resources to fend off a huge number of lawsuits, like the New York Times. I'm waiting to see all these advertisers start suing these corporate media people who are using the Chinese botnet to inflate the clicks at their websites and who are faking their Twitter followers. Because that's fraud. That's defrauding the advertisers.
That is correct. Hey, Michael, do you know if Trump's speech is going to be televised tonight?
Of course it is.
All right. And what is it, like 9 o'clock or something? Eastern time?
It is 3 hours and 16 minutes from now, although he'll probably grandstand and delay it a little bit. So that will be...
One last question.
Yes.
And I have one last question. Do you know if there's any evidence that Saudi Arabia funded 20% of Hillary Clinton's campaign? I'm like a little debate with the local radio station.
Basically,
here,
that was a claim that came from one of the Saudi royal families, where they were saying they were donating not just to Hillary's campaign, but they were heavy donators to the Clinton Foundation. As far as donations to Hillary's campaign, anything coming from Saudi Arabia would have to be run through a cutout, because it is technically illegal to accept donations from a foreign government. So it would have to be laundered the way the Clintons did in Chinagate. And, of course, I assume that John McCain, when he was approaching Russia for campaign donations in 2008, that he had some kind of a pipeline set up to get the money into the country and have it at least appear legal.
Uh-huh. And I always get information from you, and that's why I call you. And I forgot what I was going to ask you. I wanted to ask you one other question. It just slipped my mind. But
okay, well, then
I really appreciate your program.
Well, thank you very much, and we're going to let you go here. We got a bunch of callers waiting on the line. Before I do that, I'm looking at Fox News, and Trump is basically coming on out saying that it is the holdover Obama staff in the White House that have been behind all the leaks going to the media so that the media can attack him. And I know Trump was trying to take the high ground in management and say, these are the people who know what's going on. I'm not going to replace them just yet. But I'll bet you there's going to be a major overhaul of the White House staff. And again, this is where Trump is very naive coming into politics. He comes from the world of business, where he expects that those people who are working for him are going to be loyal to him, because he's effectively signing their paychecks. And he wasn't prepared for Washington, D.C., where just because somebody is on your payroll working for you does not guarantee that they are not actually working against you. That's the dark world of politics, and Trump really was caught off guard by that. In many ways, he's just as naive as Jimmy Carter was coming on in. All right, let's grab a couple more phone calls and then get back to the news. Mateus in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I decided to call in. I live in Canada, Vancouver, BC specifically, and I just drove by downtown core, and there's, I don't know, maybe 150, 200 people protesting against Trump, dump Trump signs. It just seems like, what a joke. I mean, give me a break. I mean, it's not even our country. We weren't protesting Obama. This just seems so artificial and so orchestrated.
It is artificial and orchestrated, but if Soros is going to try and push a color revolution inside this country, he's got to convince the people of other countries that somehow Trump deserved it. And so, yeah, we're going to see these manufactured protests visible in cities, Canada, Europe, and so forth.
Yeah, like we got our own issues to protest about. We're pretty subdued people here. We're still under the crown. We never had the courage to break away from the tyranny. And right now, we're basically a conquered people psychologically. There's no way that we're willing to go and protest some other country's political disagreement if we're not even willing to get off our asses and protect our own countries from corruption. And then I also, on the same topic of public protest, I just wanted to mention that it's a recurring protest where we have in front of the Chinese embassy a large banner saying "Stop Live Human Organ." I forget the name. Transplants.
Okay.
So apparently, this is a big issue in China where you're having live. I think it's when people are executed, just before they're executed, or while they're being executed, they're having their organs removed. And
well, I'm
you
not.
can debate that's a conspiracy theory, but the Chinese embassy here is convinced of it so much that it's a regular issue.
Well, there's two ways to look at that. First of all, we're seeing a bash China in the corporate media, just like we're seeing a bash Russia. But looking at this issue of a live organ donation from somebody who's about to be executed for a crime, I actually don't have a problem with that. And if circumstances were ever to result in me being convicted of a capital crime and looking at the death penalty, I would make that as my last request. If there's anything in here that's still any good for anybody, help yourself. I mean, I have an organ donor. I have an organ donor card. I have a note on it. Please make sure I'm really dead first.
Well, that's actually the issue here, Michael. That's the issue, is that they're protesting that the people are not really dead first. They're not protesting donations of organs after death. They're protesting very specifically live ones. So, I'm just passing that out there that it's not just a crazy conspiracy theory on the internet. There's actually the Chinese embassy, a very large one in downtown core of Vancouver, regularly, about like a 50-foot banner and like maybe 50 people out there at any one time kind of meditating some Chinese
okay, Mateus.
Yeah, I just wanted to pass that on.
Okay, Mateus, but let me, if it is happening in China as you describe, okay, I'm assuming that the patient has already been rendered unconscious so that he's not thrashing around on the operating table, and so they're going to harvest the organs and just not let him wake back up. And I got to be honest, I'm not entirely sure that's necessarily a bad thing for somebody who has been legitimately convicted of a capital crime. And I would certainly, if that were me on the table, I'd rather do that than have my body thrown in a hole in the ground and it be of no benefit to anybody but the worms. So...
Yeah, and unfortunately there's a lot of potential corruption where somebody could be like a perfect specimen that just what the doctor ordered and is...
Well, there's always that possibility. I mean, if you look at all the judges who've been caught sending people to those prison factories and receiving money for it because the prison factory needed somebody who could run this particular machine. And so there's always that possibility of corruption. But again...
Yeah, and then anyone that wants to look up themselves, just search for mobile execution vans, because to keep the organs as fresh as possible, they drive you to the airport as they're executing you and remove the organ and put it on the plane. It's really a horrible thing that's going on, even if it's only like 10% true.
I got to tell you, I'm not finding that to be as much a problem. Got to let you go. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And the email is already starting to pour in over my comments about the practice of recycling organs of condemned criminals in China. And so let me be very clear. I personally am opposed to the death penalty because of all the people who have been wrongly sent to death in this country. And until we can restore life to those it is wrongfully taken from, we shouldn't take it in the first place. That being said, in China, they do have a death penalty. And if they're able to save other people's lives with this condemned person, I don't find that I have a real problem with that. One email I got in said, you need to research organ harvesting for big bucks in Kiev and Tel Aviv and the Syrian white helmets. Well, in those cases, you're not dealing with people who've been convicted of a capital crime. And that is an issue of organ harvesting from people who don't deserve to have their organs harvested. So it is a very, very complicated issue. Now then, before we go back to the phones here, a little bit of history. As Donald Trump girds himself for battle with the American corporate media, which has a long track record of lying, there is an historical precedent he might want to keep in mind. In May of 1864, Joseph Howard Jr., a reporter in New York, printed a fake presidential proclamation in two major New York newspapers. The proclamation, which was blamed on President Lincoln, called for the draft of additional new troops into the Union Army. And if you will remember your history of New York during the Civil War, the draft triggered massive riots, property damage, and death. And Lincoln ordered the general in charge of the Army in New York to arrest Howard and the others responsible, seize their newspapers. And Howard remained in jail until August, when Lincoln pardoned him. Now, despite having been caught at that lie, Howard managed to continue writing for the New York Times and was even eventually elected president of the New York Press Club. It shows you just how corrupt that whole industry is, which is why we call them prostitutes and correspondents. It's what they do. Go back and read what Swindon spoke about the corporate media. All righty, let's see. We're going to take a phone call. Steve in California, got a few minutes before the commercial, before station identification. What's on your mind?
Well, I've got a speaking engagement tonight for the Eagle Forum, and there's a question I have.
on the CDC itself. Now, you mentioned, and my research shows also the same, that they hold 20 patents and bring in about $4.5 billion a year. Now, how is it that a government entity that's to serve the people is allowed to seek profit? And I was trying to figure if I can't find the answer to that question.
Well, because the CDC, like the Federal Reserve, is not actually a part of the government. And yes, they're both using .gov extensions, but the reality is CDC is a private for-profit corporation, and it gets a lot of its funding from the very pharmaceutical companies it's supposed to be keeping an eye on. But you're right, they have patents for over 20 vaccines, and they make $4.5 billion a year from it. They are not objective. We'll be right back after station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to go ahead, get on back to the phones here. Steve in Texas. Aloha, Steve. No, we dropped Steve. Dustin in New Jersey.
That's the one. No, we got in Texas.
With Steve in Texas. Okay, Steve. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
This is Mark in Philly.
This is Mark in Philadelphia. All right, we'll take Mark in Philadelphia, then we'll back up to the other 2 calls that are still in the queue here. I miss my Comrex stack. All right, Mark, what's on your mind?
Okay, so employment. So I have a little story to tell you here, but quick as I can here. A young man moves to New York, and just a few years ago, and he goes to a school, 2-year school. It's called Baruch College. It's part of the City University of New York, called CUNY, acronym CUNY. Mm-hmm. It's the City of University of New York system for, community colleges. Anyway, Baruch College. So he goes to school for 2 years for a business, and he comes out and he tries to find work. He can't find work with this degree, and it's like but he finds out from his close friends that he's met, and anyway, that there's this place that will guarantee employment if he goes through this course. Okay, so he takes this other course, and it turns out that he gets employment. Mm-hmm. He gets gets employment starting at $73,000 a year. Okay. Right? That's incredible. So I heard about this. I said, wow, sign me up. Surely, what's he doing? Well, he's filling out forms. Filling out forms? What do you mean filling out forms? I said, what was this course he took? It was a 2-week course. Oh, 2 weeks? And he ended up getting $73,000 a year? Yeah. What was the course about? It was about learning how to fill out government forms. Really? Mm-hmm. So who hired him? Who hired him? I asked this person who's telling me the story. A government subcontractor. I said, a government subcontractor? Really? And he says, yeah. And he's now, a few years later, he says he's moved to D.C. because he got an upgrade. He got a promotion. Well, he got a promotion in scale. He's making $86,000 a year now. I said, really? Mm-hmm. So now he's 34 years old, and he's living in D.C. That was the deal. He moved to D.C. and he's getting $86,000. I said, so wow. So he's got higher he's got higher responsibility, management or whatever. He says, no, he's doing exactly the same thing he was doing before. I said, oh, filling out forms? He says, yeah. I said, do you have any? I said, do you have any idea who he's working for? He says, well, it's a government contractor. And I mentioned a few. I said like maybe Accenture or something. He says, that sounds familiar. I said, yeah, well, that's interesting. I said, wow, Accenture, their government contracts to the government filling out forms. He says, well, and he told me, he says, and this was his nephew. He says, and my nephew's not necessarily the brightest kid, but that's what he's doing. I said, wow, that's very interesting. I said, well, where do I sign up? He says, I don't know if you could do it. I said, and here's the key, Mike. Mm-hmm. He's an Indian. He's an Indian from India.
From India, okay.
Okay, and here's who owns Accenture?
Who?
The tribe. The tribe owns Accenture. Filling out government forms to get government contracts or grant proposals or whatever. You know, I can imagine rooms filled full of these guys getting multi-million dollars, billions of dollars worth of contracts going out. That I don't think that's available to other people who establish.
Well, yeah, it is.
It
is because I know quite a few people who are professional grant writers, where that's all they do. They will be hired by various organizations, private, educational, including government, to actually write up a grant proposal, and they know how to do it in a way where the likelihood of getting the grant is maximized, and they make very, very good money doing it.
Yeah, well, I don't know that this is grant writing, but it could be. But it's filling out forms, just simple filling out, the tedious task of filling out the forms. But the thing is, if you look into the history of Accenture was partnered up with that Gupta guy, from India, who had a special, rubber stamp deal for the H-1B visas coming over during the Clinton administration, and that's still continued on to this day. And you're going to tell me that Indians are smarter than regular Americans? Look, the people that were here before are the ones that dug the hole, the ones that planted the seed, the ones that nurtured the tree, that grows the fruit, that these people come from foreign nations and they come over and
hang on, Mark, before you get really going on the rant here, I have an important question. This individual who is filling out the forms and he's making this money, is he legally allowed to be in this country? Does he have a green card? Is he a resident? Is he a naturalized citizen?
Yes, he is.
Well, then I'm sorry, but I don't see the point that you're making here, because the issue with immigration are the illegal immigrants and refugees. This individual has obviously become a positive contributing part of our society and our economy, and if he found an opportunity. And is there scum?
No.
I know that a lot of people are very angry about the H-1B visas. But if you're concerned about that, where you point the finger of blame is not at this gentleman who's making this money filling out the forms, but at an educational system that has not trained Americans to be able to qualify for the same jobs.
No, I'm not aiming at him. I'm saying that the subcontractors to the government have set it up that they gamed the system against others, the ones that established this country and established the economics and established a high standard of living, and we're the ones that my forefathers dug the ground, planted the seed, nurtured the tree for the fruit to grow, for other people to have a better pathway to, of a higher standard of living. I understand that. But these people come here and they want to pick the low-hanging fruit and then demand that they should be at the head of the line to pick that fruit, and they deserve it, and they're more privileged, and, forget the rest of us. I'm not blaming him individually, but the system is gamed.
Mark, everybody's trying to game the system for their own way here, okay? But at core, ultimately, I'm a meritocratist, and I don't necessarily buy the idea that this individual got this job because somebody was playing favorites, especially with all the criticisms of the H-1B visa program right now. It sounds to me like whatever course he went through, he came on out, and he was qualified to do the job he was hired for. Anyway, listen, Mark, we're going to let you go.
It was a 2-week.
We're going to let you, Mark. We're going to let you go. Mark, we're going to let you go here. And I understand your frustrations and your anger, but life inherently is not fair. I remember one time when I was just starting to work out for NASA, and I almost lost my job because they needed an affirmative action minority hire. Fortunately, at the last minute, somebody intervened and said, we really need this guy. But, politics, unfortunately, anytime politics favors one person, somebody else gets hurt. And that is unfortunately, the dark side of politics. You can't take something from, one person and give it to the other without causing that disruption. Those who are going to rob Peter to pay Paul are always going to be supported by Paul, and Peter's going to run around saying, what the heck just happened? And I understand that. The issue with immigration is not with those who are here legally, and it shouldn't be. And we shouldn't allow them to blur the line between the two and just say all immigrants, are bad, because all immigrants aren't bad. There are immigrants who have come to this country through the legal process who have turned out to be a tremendous benefit to our society, Albert Einstein being a good example of that. Our issue is with this open borders policies, which is allowing the worst of the people in those source countries open access to our society, our streets, our children, our social services, and so forth and so on. Anyway, we're going to do a shout-out to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're going to switch over to Steve in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day, Mike. It's a great day. I want just the whole thing that you were talking about where they're going to get prescriptions for people that are homeless.
Yes.
Wow, that'll never work because first you have to let the illegal aliens and the migrants. I know it sounds nuts, but no, this is the truth.
Well, now
around here where I live at, if you're if you're a migrant or you're in like a status of like say, I come from a country that's having trouble and stuff, they go ahead the line of like veterans and people have mental illnesses and people are underemployed and stuff through HUD housing, and they automatically give it to people that honestly don't even work.
Well, I mean, that's coming out of that Obama administration New World Order agenda. Now, here in Hawaii, first of all, I want to go back and clarify. They're not writing prescriptions for homes for all of the homeless people, just those whose chronic illnesses are becoming a greater cost burden by leaving them on the streets. Second of all, the vast majority of our homeless here... May I finish? The vast majority of homeless here in Hawaii are American citizens. They came here from the mainland. They were promised jobs. The promised jobs were not delivered, and they're stuck here. And so that's an additional hardship.
Well, see, I'm sorry. I misunderstood what you were saying at first. Around here, it's like anybody who has immigration status goes to have a line, and it's really sad to me because we have people living in the woods out here. I agree. As long as we have a single American sleeping in an alley or eating out of a trash dumpster, we should not be allowing everybody else to just pour on into this country, nor should we be giving any of our tax money to any foreign government anywhere. And we really need to get back to that. Okay? Yeah, absolutely. Hey, thanks, Mike. We'll talk to you later, man.
All right, thanks. We're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Dustin, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I feel sorry for Mateus. I thought I was behind enemy lines. Canada is like way behind enemy lines, that socialist utopia. I thought he was going to say they had a all-day buffet sign at the Chinese embassy, not the organs thing. Hey, Mike, the previous caller, well, the one before that about, his forefathers planted this. We're all to blame. The government's to blame, the corporations to blame, and the people, to an extent, to blame. We allowed this rot to occur because we got, I hate to say this, lazy in a way. Not all of us, some of us. We allowed us to outsource the jobs overseas. Trump is trying to fix this problem, but but people like the way the system is now. A certain population.
Well, wait a minute. Yes, I will concede that there has been a tremendous complacency in the American people. We have fallen for the whole bread and circuses diversions, although we call them fashion shows and football games and so forth. But the reality is, once our election system was compromised, and it's been compromised for many administrations, we lost control over our politicians. And once the politicians were freed from having to make sure the voters were happy, they started doing what made themselves happy. No American voted to have their jobs offshored. No Americans voted to have wide open borders. This was all done because our government authority and our corporate interests aligned together in their own self-interest against the general population, which is the classic definition of fascism. And corporations wanted to offshore jobs because that improved their profitability, at least at the start. And government went along with it because corporations are really generous donors come campaign season. Now, of course, the short-sightedness of that policy is now evident because so many jobs were offshored and so many jobs have been automated. Ordinary people cannot trade their labor for decent wages and salaries in order to pump that wealth back into the economy at the bottom, and that's why it's locking up.
That's one thing Donald Trump's got to make clear tonight, Mike.
Yes.
He needs this, like the flyover country, the middle of the country that's been left behind, the east and west coast of the country, just like in Europe. It's the same system. You know, he needs to make clear that. You know, that this is a globalism versus now. He needs to really make clear that, because I think more people will understand then what's going on, because it's going to get worse, Mike. It is getting worse. Just look at Switzerland the other day. They have riots against the police because it's orchestrated against regular people now and the police. So it happened here with Black Lives Matter. It's the same playbook they're playing.
Color revolution, New World Order and globalism. But again, the reason I don't want to see this go any further, because they're causing a lot of damage, they're hurting a lot of people, and it is destroying the image of America around the world. If anybody was still convinced that the United States was the greatest nation on earth a year ago, that illusion has been shattered by the behavior of the liberal Democrats and the protesters and the crybabies and so forth and so on. But again, for a color revolution to work, those who are trying to bring about a change must have the support of the general population. The general population has to believe in what the revolutionaries, the coup planners, are trying to do. And in this case, they don't have it. The same thing happened in Iran in 2009. The more extreme these crybabies and whiners are behaving, the less and less people are listening to them. They're destroying their own brand. And it's like I've said many times before, how far do you think George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and the boys would have gotten freeing us from the Bank of England if they had gone into the colonial schools and started beating up on the kids there? And the answer, they wouldn't have gotten very far at all. Anybody trying to bring about socio-political change must have the support of the general population, and this color revolution by Soros does not have it. They're trying to create the illusion they have it with all these staged protests and organized riots and protests up in Vancouver and everything. But everybody's looking around for themselves and realizing that whoever is standing out there with the placards about dump Trump, we don't see them as sympathetic people. We don't understand them. We don't identify with them. And that's why I think this whole attempt at the color revolution is going to come crashing down. And at that point, I do think Trump needs to start looking at prosecuting people for subversion.
Yeah, because, Mike, this is not going to end, because this is all those people got, is that globalist cult mentality. You know, they're just not going to let up, and they're going to pull out all the stops. Like tonight, this is a State of the Union tonight, right?
Well, yes.
But they're going to have illegal immigrant people in the audience, and I think Meryl Streep they invited over. So I wouldn't be surprised if people stood up with signs, Mike. I mean, it's become that bad now.
Well, again, the brand is being damaged. I mean, Meryl Streep is a fine actress, but Hollywood is now being seen as part of the problem that got our country into this mess. Meryl Streep really messed up, because for the Academy Awards, Chanel offered to loan her a $100,000 gown for her to be seen in, and she turned around and said, no, you pay me to wear it. And that did not go over very well. Chanel basically said, all right, you can wear jeans and a T-shirt for all we care.
Thanks a lot, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now then, story coming out of Trump.news, new website here. Apparently, there was a teacher in a school who was punished for praising Donald Trump in class. Wow, what a world we are living in. When I was going to school, all the way back in New England farming country a long time ago, everybody praised the president regardless of who they were. If you criticized the president in the school I went to, you were in trouble. And here's where it's getting really weird. Apparently, at Dinwiddie High School in Virginia, a student was ordered to remove the American flag from the back of his truck. The assistant principal said, you can't have that on there. It's going to make certain people feel uncomfortable. Like the illegal immigrants. Well, I'm sorry, but if you're an illegal immigrant, I think maybe you should be uncomfortable about what you've done. Because if people are not allowed to feel bad about breaking the law, you're going to have a lot more law breaking. Doesn't that just make common sense? We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with the rest of the show after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, story coming out of governmentslaves.info. Woman, a mother, living in Buffalo, New York, and she'd had her kids in public school, was very unhappy with the teaching methods and the curriculum, so she opted to remove her children from those schools and register them as homeschooled. And she got reported for educational neglect, and she's now been arrested and her children seized by CPS. Now, in the state of New York, they have all kinds of red tape and hoops for anybody who wants to homeschool their children. You have to just go through all this incredible mess, and apparently this mother did it all, did all the paperwork, crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's. But apparently the complaint is that as a homeschool teacher, she is not teaching the approved Common Core curriculum to the children. And the state of New York has decided that they know better than the mother what the children ought to be thinking and feeling, and what they should believe in. In other words, New York has negated the whole point of homeschooling by saying you can homeschool your children as long as you do the approved brainwashing of them. That the Second Amendment doesn't grant individuals a right to keep and bear arms. That humans are warming the world. We're living under a governmental system that thinks it owns us and our children. We are their property. We're their herd of human livestock. And they will make all the decisions. They will decide what you will eat, what you will not eat, what medicines you'll be forced to take, what medicines you're not allowed to have. Because after all, the government knows best. It's all about profit, all about control. It's all about reducing the population of a nation to a slave status, to total dependency in order to harvest as much wealth from them for the least amount of upkeep. That was what was going on behind the Michelle Obama school lunch program, getting the kids used to eating really bad processed corporate food instead of healthy eating. Because healthy food costs way too much to feed to you. There's not enough of it. We need to keep the healthy, safe, organic food for those of us at the very top. Remember, Monsanto doesn't serve GMO in their own company cafeteria. No, this processed corporate stuff, that's fodder for you, the animals, the proletariat, as it were. All right, so let's talk a little bit about computers. This Amazon Web Service outage appears to be rather pronounced and severe. I'm noticing that access to my web server is greatly reduced, except, unfortunately, from the hackers who seem to have unfettered access to cause their mischief. And it's not like Amazon Web Service is necessarily clean in that regard, because many of the attacks directed against my server originate with Amazon Web Service. A lot of them originate from Google's servers. Now, speaking of Google, we are getting word that late last night, when they hoped nobody would notice, Google did reinstate natural news to their search engines in response to the massive backlash by we, the First Amendment freedom of speech loving Americans. Now, the bad news is Google has established their ability and their willingness to censor anyone at any time for any reason without explanation or justification. They are acting as a totalitarian control over the information found on their search engines, which is why you should really be looking at other search engines. I'm not willing to forgive and forget just because they were forced to put natural news back in. They don't strike me as being tremendously repentant. There's been no official apology or even an acknowledgement that what they did in the first place was wrong. So it may be that the White House petition to get Trump to look into what Google had done, or was, as of the last check, only 30,000 signatures to go, and almost a month to get it filled up. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, up in Oroville, California, yesterday they started closing off the floodgates to cut off the flow of water down the concrete spillway. The emergency spillway has not overtopped since the first time it happened. And they succeeded in getting the floodgates closed earlier today, and finally we're getting to see the real extent of the damage to the dam. And it is intense. There's all kinds of videos on YouTube. We put one up at WhatReallyHappened.com where just that whole hillside below the emergency spillway is scoured away, and the whole lower end of where the concrete spillway used to be is just completely gouged out. And the problem is that the water, as fast as it was flowing, was not flowing fast enough to wash the debris away. And now at the bottom, what they call the plunge pool, is completely full, and it's blocked the Feather River, which in turn has backed water up into the power station at the bottom of the Oroville Dam and its spillway. So now there's a huge amount of work it's going to take to get that dam repaired, and there are still questions remaining about how badly compromised that northern berm is on the dam itself. But apparently they're estimating 1 million cubic yards of debris was washed down into that Feather River. It's going to have to be removed over the next week because they're expecting more rains to come on in. So they're now out of the woods there. And obviously we're all very delighted that the dam held up and the people of Oroville did not get flooded out. But the dam is weak. It's compromised. This is the second time questions have been raised about whether it's still able to do its job. The first one being following a moderate quake in the area. And by the way, there was no structural survey done following the quake. They just said, it's going to be okay. We have better things to spend California taxpayers' monies on, like, well, those illegal immigrants coming on in. Because we're liberals, and the dam would never dare rupture while a liberal is in the governor's office. Yesterday, we reported on this story that was coming out of Canadian media on how they had run tests on the chicken products of various fast food restaurants, basically testing DNA in the chicken products. Now, because cooking destroys DNA, nobody was expecting 100% chicken DNA in the chicken patties. And most fast food restaurants were scoring 85, 86%, which is very reasonable. It's what you would expect. When they checked Subway's chicken patties, they got a shock. Only half of it was actually chicken DNA. The chicken strips were even lower, and the rest was soy. Well, Subway is now out there saying that they're concerned that the DNA test showed its chicken is more than 50% soy. Guess we're going to call it Soylent Cluck Cluck. And I imagine Subway is trying to already get the spin doctors in there to mount some kind of a public relations campaign that just because the chicken patty isn't all chicken is no reason to question whether or not Subway sandwiches are healthy and good for your diet, forgetting that a lot of people have very negative reactions to soy. It's not the wonderful, we can feed all of the human livestock on it product that it was hoped it was going to be. So Subway is looking at a way to counter that, and of course after the denouement of their spokesman for grabbing the little kitties, this is strike two, and it looks like Subway's brand is also getting tarnished right alongside Starbucks, which is kind of appropriate because down at our little strip mall down there, they're like next door, across the street from each other here. Now, do you remember the Takata Corporation? They were the ones who have manufactured airbags that are used in a great many automobiles. And it turned out the airbags were not only defective, Takata knew there was a problem and chose to do nothing about it. Now, Takata Corp has pleaded guilty in federal court to wire fraud and has agreed to pay $1 billion in criminal penalties stemming from Takata's fraudulent conduct related to the sales of these defective airbag inflating units. It's the actual part that explodes to inflate the airbag. As far as I can tell, no corporate executives are going to prison, as they well should. And our fascist economic dictatorship is fully on display because U.S. District Court Judge George Karamsky was saying that they were going to structure the fine in order to protect the company. And he said, quote, destruction of the company would be appropriate, but the interest of the victims and the automakers dictates we do the best we can without destroying the corporation. Now, if corporations are persons, then they should be subject to the same punishment as any other person who breaks the law, who commits a fraud, who makes a product that kills people. There should be jail time involved, and if necessary, a death penalty. I do not agree with propping up corporations that have failed to do the job they're supposed to be doing. Now, there's a new lawsuit that's come on out saying that 5 automakers knew of the dangers of the Takata airbag and still went ahead and used them in their cars for year after year after year because they were the least expensive out there. And apparently the companies involved with these airbags include Honda, Toyota, Nissan, Ford, and BMW. That one's a surprise because when I was younger, BMW was supposed to be the premium brand. That's a rich person's car. And apparently they were using these very inexpensive inflators for the airbags, and they knew they were defective. Rented lips. And this is a good example of what I've been saying about this lust for money having undermined what used to be the best qualities of being an American. Now, the United States that I grew up in, yeah, we all wanted to make a decent living. We didn't feel the need to be insanely wealthy. We had a balance of drives in our lives. Yes, we wanted to make a good living, take care of our family. We wanted a good house. We wanted to be proud of what we did as a job. We wanted to take pride in what we produced, what we grew. Because the quality of our work, our workmanship, our product, was as much a part of our self-esteem as how much money we had. And today we live in a society where money and the things that money can buy seem to be the only measure that we apply to each other. We live in a society where our finest nightclubs would admit mafia drug lords and CIA assassins in their Armani jackets, but would block Gandhi and Mother Teresa because they just don't come up to the dress code. I mean, look at this stuff. Look how they're dressed. It's so last year. That's what our society has become. It's become superficial. It's become decadent. And this is a lesson we're passing on to the next generation. How much money you make, that's all that matters. How you make it, doesn't matter. If you cheat people for it, doesn't matter. If you sell absolute junk products that fall apart as soon as the warranty is over or the payment plan is expired, doesn't matter. Just getting that money. I remember when the movie Wall Street came out with Michael Douglas, and he's making that motivational speech to traders saying greed is good. And then he amended that in Wall Street 2 by coming on out and saying greed may not be good. And I think that was more Michael Douglas himself wanting to set the record straight. Greed in and of itself is not good. It leads to those who will game the system to get that rush of money coming on in without returning anything substantive to our society. Now, I'm an old-fashioned capitalist. I think if you make something, you make a good product, and you get paid for it, and you get rich that way, that is to be applauded. And I hold up as icons, as ideals for our next generation. People like Steve Jobs, or George Lucas, or James Cameron, my all-time favorite film director, who focused on doing what they did, making the Apple II, making Star Wars, making Avatar, and we voluntarily, of our own free will, trade our money for the tickets, the toys, the computer. And they got very, very rich, and that is the way it is supposed to work. Because before the wealth came that focus on delivering a quality product people were going to want to buy, as opposed to our culture today, where somebody will come up with a Bluetooth headphone for the cell phone and then lobby the government to make it mandatory to own one before you drive your car, or make it mandatory to have these vaccines, or make it mandatory to have this or that, or mandatory insurance on your car, mandatory insurance on your health. Because left to our own decisions, we would look at the deals being offered by these companies and saying, these are no good. We are losing our freedom of choice as consumers. I used to go into stores when I was a kid, and there was amazing variety. You could choose to buy whatever you want. Saw that all over Europe. It was beautiful. These days you go into a supermarket, and it's basically the shelves are just full of stacks and stacks and stacks of the same thing. And the attitude is, this is what we're selling you. Buy what we want you to buy or do without. In my case, I generally do without. We're trying to create a society in which we simply accept what the corporations want us to buy and go home happy. And I'm not happy. I like a little variety in my life. I like the idea that I can go to a store and have several different versions of what I need. And it's not just the food stores. You go into, like, Best Buy. It's all Windows 10. I want Windows 7. Oh, well, we can order it for you. Well, I can order it. We saw that in full display with Microsoft, the way they literally jammed Windows 10 down our throats. When we did not want Windows 10, we wanted the problems fixed in XP and Windows 7. I grew up in a world where the wisdom of retail is the customer's always right. We've lost that one. That's been taken away from us. The attitude is, you will buy what we are going to sell you. And as soon as the warranty is over, it's probably going to fail. Unless you buy the extended warranty, which is where we're going to charge you a lot more money to make sure the product lasts as long as we promised it was going to in the first place. Isn't that a weird thing to be living with? You go and you buy a TV, and the advertising says it will last you 5 years. But it's only got a 1-year warranty on it. But they'll sell you a 5-year warranty for additional money. Weird. All right, over in Europe, Germany and France are lobbying hard for backdoors into all encryption available to ordinary people. And, of course, a lot of people are concerned about issues of privacy, given the tendency of all of these globalist-leaning governments to want to monitor ordinary people. And as we demonstrated with our NSA challenge some years ago, encryption backdoors on ordinary people do not find terrorists or criminals, because terrorists and criminals can create their own encryption that does not have a backdoor that cannot be cracked by the NSA. So all this backdoor encryption has nothing to do with terrorism, has nothing to do with finding criminals. It's about a government absolutely terrified out of their mind that you are no longer thinking those double plus good thoughts they want you to think. That you're starting to break free. That you're starting to see government for how it truly is. And that you might be inclined to stop being so obedient in the future, where they insist you open your home to the flood of refugees and illegal immigrants. That you might be a little resistant when the government comes to take your children for yet another pointless war of conquest to make the oil companies richer. They've taken away almost everything else in your life. They're trying to take away your freedom of thought. And you need to take it back. Now, maybe all of this backdoor encryption is actually a bluff to try and scare you into silence, to say, be careful what you say to your friends and neighbors. The government's watching. The Gestapo played that hoax on the people of Nazi Germany. They literally crafted an image where the Gestapo was everywhere. They saw everything. They heard everything. They read everything. Nobody could escape their gaze. And it was a bluff. The Gestapo simply didn't have the resources to be watching all of the people of Germany. And if we look at the utter failure of the National Security Agency to find the ransomware writers or the cyber criminals or just the people loading up my inbox with ads for Viagra, it's beginning to look like it was just a gigantic, expensive, costly bluff. And it certainly did not work, to judge by the online activism that led to last year's election upset. All right, apparently up in Chicago, the model for gun control for all of America, 14 people got shot over this last weekend. The violence in Chicago is already outpacing this same time last year. Isn't gun control wonderful? Gun control works, if you're a criminal, of course. And that's why I say being anti-gun is being pro-crime. Maybe that's where the gun grabbers get a lot of their funding. Because back during Prohibition, when the gangsters were getting rich on bootleg alcohol, they were actually funding the temperance movement to keep Prohibition in place. They'd use cutouts, so these people who were arguing for Prohibition to remain didn't realize who they were really working for. But the gangsters knew as soon as Prohibition ended, the money would stop. And I think the same thing is going on, where we need to look and see if some of these gun grabber organizations are being funded by organized crime in order to keep their street-level workforce safe. We promise our muggers and rapists and burglars and drug dealers a safe work environment, and that means disarming the law-abiding citizens. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of the program. Today, we're a little more than 2 hours away from President Trump's address to a joint session of Congress. There is an unfounded rumor floating around. He's going to get up there and say, well, since the liberals say I can be whatever gender I want to be, I am the first woman president of the United States of America. Sorry, Hillary. Anyway, getting on to human-caused global warming. I got an email from somebody up in Seattle that's saying they're in whiteout conditions up there. And I was looking through the Washington State Department of Transportation cameras. They have cameras all over the roadways there. Looking up where Claire and I used to live before we moved to Hawaii. And apparently their road clearing budget is almost exhausted because the road clearing budget every year is based on historical data in terms of stockpiles of road salt, de-icing solution, and apparently they're just about out, and winter's not quite over here. Now, Bill Nye, the science guy, who is hardcore human-caused global warming supporter, was on with Tucker Carlson, and Bill Nye is now out there saying that anybody who questions human-caused global warming obviously suffers from psychological delusions. You don't get much more Stalin-esque than that, because that's what they used to do in the old Soviet Union. If you disagreed with the government, oh, you're mentally ill. We're going to put you in a hospital. And even when you get out of the hospital, everybody's going to say, oh, they're mentally ill. We shouldn't listen to them. Now, when Bill Nye gets down to that kind of an argument that those who don't agree with him are mentally ill, you know they have run out of any other arguments, and Tucker Carlson ripped into him. And it was pleasant to watch. It was enjoyable to watch. But they are still pushing that agenda because that's one of the major parts of their globalism agenda, that we all have to submit to a global environmental authority who will save planet Earth from all of us icky-poo human beings. And that global authority will tell us that we have to live in little tiny micro houses and not use too much resources because the rich and powerful need it all for their palaces. Costs a lot to heat those huge piles of marble and everything else. A little bit of sad news. We're just now catching up on this. Dan Olmsted was an investigative journalist, and apparently he'd just written an article about the rash of unusual deaths among healthy and youngish holistic doctors in 2016. More than 60 over the last 18 months, and he himself passed away on January 24th. Declared as natural causes by the coroner, no autopsy allowed. The family is still trying to get an autopsy as to what killed him. They are being blocked. And that right there tells you that it probably wasn't natural causes. Because if it was natural causes, go ahead and have an autopsy. But when they're out there saying, no, you can't have an autopsy. It's natural causes. It's natural causes. Something suspicious there. Okay, very tragic story. Well, you know something? There's the music. There's our tragedy. It's the end of the show. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay skeptical, stay informed, make good choices, share what you know with everybody that you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.